Now to those behaving badly on airplanes. Delta CEO wants the Department of Justice to put unruly passengers convicted of crimes on planes on a federal no-fly list. But now a number of Republican senators are pushing back. As we've been reporting, incidents have gone up in part because of mask requirements. And some Republican lawmakers say banning these passengers from flying would equate those who refuse to wear a mask on planes to terrorists. Well, here are the stats. Since the beginning of last year, there have been more than 6,300 violent or disruptive incidents on planes, most of them mask-related. And of the more than 6,000 incidents, 80 of them have been referred to the DOJ for prosecution. But there's no denying, flying has been downright scary on some flights. That's just a sampling. Remember, just last week, 2 American Airlines flights were forced to divert. This video from a flight where a passenger tried to open the cockpit door, we are told, and a crew member stopped him by hitting him on the head with a pot of coffee. I want to discuss all this with Sara Nelson. She's the president of the Association of Flight Attendants. Sara, it's always good to see you. In this letter to the Justice Department, this group of Republican senators argues, and I quote from this letter, the creation of this list by DOJ would result in a severe restriction on the ability of citizens to fully exercise their constitutional right to engage in interstate transportation. What say you?
I would say that they should start with voting for voting rights to make sure that people can express their constitutional rights. But what I would also say is get serious. Come on now. This has been over a year that these events have been off the charts. People are starting to look at this, and like you said, it's downright scary, and they're looking at that. And so they're saying, when I buy a ticket, is this what my flying experience is going to be like? The flight attendants who are working these flights have been punched, kicked, spit on, disrespected, and constantly under assault. And so we need to be very clear about what the rules are, what the consequences are if you don't follow them, and then those consequences need to be in place. And we have fines from the FAA. We have the DOJ now prosecuting some of these cases. And we have the ability to put together a list where we're sharing this information and telling people that for a period of time, you're also subject to losing your freedom of flight if you're behaving this way. And the reason this is so important is because if we make this a normal occurrence, what we're handing to the terrorists who would like to still use commercial aircraft against this country as a weapon, we are handing another distraction to them and another tool in their toolkit. And we just simply cannot allow that to happen. So these senators are really not on the right path here in terms of making sure that our country remains safe.
Well, I think they have said they do support airlines instituting their own no-fly list, which I know some have. Why doesn't that work?
It's really important that there is a federal program where there is consistency of sharing that information and reporting that information. And if you have individual airlines doing that, you don't have that kind of consistency. You also don't have potentially a very good due process in this process, because what you're doing is you're counting on the airlines and their internal investigations, and there may not be real due process for those passengers. So if you have a government program where that can be transparent, everybody understands how it works, you understand how you get on the list, you understand how you get off the list, you also have a protocol for how you're sharing this information on the day of the events, and then what you're doing for the long term in terms of the consequences. You can do that through a federal program that you cannot do through individual airlines just coming up with how they're going to put this in place on their own.
Real quick, because we know there have been 80 cases, more than 6,000 violent or disruptive incidents that have been referred to the Department of Justice so far. Is that enough? And do you think the DOJ is acting fast enough on those?
Well, one thing that's really important to recognize is we keep hearing that there's all these mask incidents. The reality is that the vast majority of the incidents that become these high-profile incidents that become very violent incidents, these are the ones that have been referred to the DOJ. Those very rarely have anything to do with masks at all. So we need to focus on the worst offenders, We need the DOJ to focus on the cases that are the best cases, that FBI has referred those cases to them. That doesn't include the ones that FBI have taken up on their own as well. And those cases need to be prosecuted. We need to get through the whole process so that people are landing in jail. Because until we have people actually landing in jail and understanding that there's real consequences for acting out on a flight, we're not going to see these incidents go down. We saw this in the late 90s when the incidents were on the rise around the world. We put this program in place. There were actually high profile events that were reported out by the media where people started landing in jail by 2008. And those events in the US went down while they were still rising in the world. So we know that this works. DOJ has to just prosecute those cases as quickly as possible, and we can use this as a real consequence that people understand.
Sara Nelson, thank you for your time and your perspective.